gonna march right up to the victorious line, right into Canaan land. Let the oppressed go. There's deliverance and power. Oh, let's sing it together. God's got an army marching. Everlasting. Ain't got me, I got it. Gonna march right up to the victory, right into Canaan. Singing, let the oppressed go free. Let the oppressed go free. Oh, sing it, let the oppressed go free. Let the oppressed go free. Let the oppressed go free. Let the grace and power for you. Let the oppressed go free. Amen. As we gather back in this morning, we want to get right into the preaching back with us this morning. Pastor Mitchell, let's give him a warm welcome as he comes to minister to us.
Not supposed to turn it over to me till all the people get back in, because they miss the point of my sermon. And it is a joy to be here. I appreciated these 2 men that preached this morning. Brother Veely's I'm sitting there listening to him. I said, there's a real pastor. He has a pastor's heart. Very, very good. So I'm going to talk a little bit and let all these people get back in here. Run them out of the toilets, too. Yeah. Everybody's asking, where are you going next? I never bring my calendar because it makes me discouraged. I don't know. But it's a real blessing. I just came from Australia. And good news there. We had a real problem in Australia as the leader tried to pull the Australian Fellowship out of the church. I had to go over there in 2009. Tom Payne went in. He's doing a tremendous job. They've recovered. I think the first night they had 900, packed their building out, and grew every night. So I don't know what they ended up with, but they put a new church in Indonesia, and their Indonesian work planted to work, and then 3 more in Australia itself. So it's they're on track. Tremendous encouragement to me to see that. If you have your Bibles, turn with me to John's Gospel, chapter 4. And I want to minister to you. John's Gospel, chapter 4. We often see people come to the Lord. And if we're not very careful, we begin to lose the insight of the tremendous spiritual dimension that has brought them to the Lord. Billy Graham passed away just recently, and he was called America's pastor. He preached to more people face to face than any man that's living on planet Earth today. I had the privilege of being in one of his meetings in 1959 in West Los Angeles, Covina. He held a crusade there in a college football field, and I saw hundreds of people streaming to the altar, and he has made impact in his generation. So when we see somebody come to the Lord, we often don't fully comprehend all the investment that God has made and the ingredients that are there. So Billy Graham has a very interesting story that has been told, and it's been reprinted in many magazines and so on and so forth. So we could focus on that and think about the ingredients that God puts in souls. John chapter 4, verse 34. Jesus said unto them, my food is to do the will of him that sent me, and to finish his work. Say not you, there are yet 4 months, and then comes harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. And he that reapeth receiveth wages, and gathers fruit unto life eternal, that both he that sows and he that reaps may rejoice together. And here's that saying true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that on which you bestowed no labor. Other men labored, and you are entered into their labor. So let's examine this for our benefit, because we're gathered in this conference to reach souls. Can you say amen? So much of life is understanding the elements that go up to make the events that we see happen. I have the great privilege of representing you in many fields. I do crusades. I just did a crusade in Tucson, Arizona, little high school auditorium, junior high school auditorium, I guess it really was, and great blessing. It's in a Hispanic area. There are many of the people that came didn't even speak English, had to be interpreted. Delgado was my interpreter, was there doing that. And I always look at that and see the value, because I didn't produce those people. I'm always aware that I didn't produce those people. There are impact teams, there are witnesses, there are people that invite their friends, bring their neighbors. I just am able to preach the gospel and cap on what the other people have done. I'm never ignorant about that. We often advertise with television, radio, various kinds of things, but the most valuable advertising, any crusade that I do, are the people that are passing out flyers and witnessing to people to get them in those crusades. We do the other things, but that's what produces that. So reading our text here, let's think for a moment this morning about the value of one. Jesus speaks about heaven's calculation of a soul, and it contrasts with the world's valuation of people. Matthew 16:26 says, what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? He's seeking to bring an understanding of the value of a human being that God brings into the kingdom of God. Solomon makes a statement, 1 Kings 3, verse 12, behold, I've done according to your words. Lo, I've given you a wise and an understanding heart. God begins to remark on the wonderful blessing that he's put in Solomon's heart. God came to Solomon and he said, what do you want? And I'm wondering if you, we're especially in a pastor's culture, we are a pastor's movement mainly, but we involve people in that. So if God came to you today and said, what do you want? I'm going to give you whatever you want. What would you ask for? I can say already that 90% say money, because we think that money solves all of life's problems. But here's Solomon now. God himself has encountered him. What do you want me to give you? And he says, I want a heart that is able to minister to your people. And God said, I like that. Because you haven't asked for long life, because you haven't asked for riches, you haven't asked for revenge on your enemies, I'm going to give you all of that. But I'm going to give you a wise and an understanding heart. This is why I was thrilled when I heard Pastor Avili's preaching, because he has grasped the heart of God. I don't know if you heard that sermon, paid attention to it, but that's what he was talking about. He was talking about being able to see people as God sees them. So this was Solomon's Solomon's statement back to God, and God gave him tremendous gifts. It says that silver was like nothing in his reign. Gold was so abundant that silver was like having rocks outside in your yard. He wrote over 1,000 songs. I can't even sing one. Are you listening to me? He was a gifted man. He had wisdom, all of these things. But let's look for a moment about the value of a soul. The Lord Jesus Christ focused on individuals. Never lose the weight of that. We see him in John's Gospel, chapter 4. This is where this statement comes out of. He's just ministered to a woman at the well. This is the original Me Too story. Some commentators speculate that she probably could have been a prostitute because many prostitutes made their way to that well for the enlistment of customers. John 4:18 says, "If you have, for you've had 5 husbands, and he who you now have is not your husband, that said you truly." In John chapter 4, verse 27, upon this came his disciples and marveled that he talked with this woman. Yet no man said, "What seekest thou?" or "Why talkest thou with her?" So let's ponder this for a moment, because here's this woman. She'd been exploited by 5 different men. We call that today relationships, don't we? It's not shacking up. When I grew up, it was shacking up. Now it's relationship. But the dynamics have not changed. These men have taken advantage of this woman, used her, put her out, but she's still captive to that lifestyle when Jesus confronts her. And so that can bring an added understanding, perhaps, of the heartache and of the desperation that's in this woman's heart. But Jesus confronts her, and this story is deliberately told to give some understanding. 2 Peter 3, verse 9, "The Lord's not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness, but is long-suffering towards us, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance." So here's the worth of a soul. This woman, in the world's eyes, is not worth much. To men, she was just being used. But Jesus confronts her, and when he confronts her, he has an objective, and that's to lead her to an experience of salvation and transformation. Many articles and many magazines have focused on Billy Graham and how he became what he was. Let me quote this, because Edward Kimball is part of this story. He was determined to win his Sunday school class to Christ, and a teenager named Dwight Moody tended to fall asleep on Sundays, but Kimball, undeterred, set out to reach him at work. His heart was pounding. As he entered the store where the young man worked, I put my hand on his shoulder. As I leaned over, I placed my foot upon a shoebox. I asked him to come to Christ. But Kimball left thinking that he had botched the job. Moody, however, left the store that day with a new person and eventually became the most prominent ever evangelist in America. On June 17th, 1873, Moody arrived in Liverpool, England, for a series of crusades. The meetings went poorly at first, but then on the dam burst, and blessedness began to flow. Moody visited a Baptist chapel pastored by a scholarly man named F.B. Meyer, who at first disdained the Americans' unlettered preaching. But Meyer was soon transfixed and transformed by Moody's message. At Moody's invitation, Meyer toured America. At Northfield Bible Conference, he challenged the crowd saying, if you're not willing to give up everything for Christ, are you willing to be made willing? That message and remark changed the life of a struggling young a minister named J. Wilbur Chapman. Chapman proceeded to become a powerful traveling evangelist in the early 1900s, and he recruited a converted baseball player named Billy Sunday. Under Chapman's eye, Sunday became one of the most spectacular evangelists in American history. His campaign in Charlotte, North Carolina, produced a group of converts who continued praying for another such visitation of the Spirit. In 1934, they invited evangelist Mordecai Ham to conduct a citywide crusade. On October the 8th, Ham, discouraged, wrote a prayer to God on the stationery of his Charlotte hotel. Lord, give us a Pentecost here. Pour out your Spirit tomorrow. His prayer was answered beyond his dreams when a Central High School student named Billy Graham gave his heart to Christ. So here's a little bit of the past history of all the figures that led up to the conversion of Billy Graham, who was able to confront more people face to face preaching the gospel than any other living man today. So let's think about that. That gives us the value of precious souls. Then we need to focus on the search for souls. Don't take for granted when someone comes to Christ. I've been a pastor a long time. I'm always troubled by people that when the altar call comes, they're out the door. They got no time to pay attention to who is there, or take part of it, or baptismal services. The auditorium empties, people go, they're not interested in that. That's one of the climax moments of the ministry. Can you say amen? There's the fruit of our labor, making a commitment publicly. So don't take this for granted, because we need to realize God's focus. In the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 1, verse 15 and 16 says, this is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptance, that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I'm chief. Nevertheless, for this cause I obtained mercy, that in me first Jesus Christ might show forth all long-suffering for a pattern to them who should thereafter believe on him to life everlasting. Luke chapter 19 and verse 5 tells us a story of a little short man. I can appreciate little short people. When I'm sitting, I have to look over the head of some idiot that's come and sit in front of me. He's 6 foot tall. Bend my knee around. So here's Zacchaeus. Jesus is passing through Jericho. He finds a sycamore tree. He climbs up in the sycamore tree so he can see. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and saw him and said unto him, Zacchaeus, make haste, come down, for today I must abide at your house. So let's ponder that for a moment. We have on somewhere in the Prescott link parts of a sermon that I preached in 1978 at the International Foursquare Gospel Convention. And if you listen to that, I was very upset. The general supervisor of the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel, which at that time was Roy Hicks Sr., he wrote in a book, and in that book he said, you should not send your people out to evangelize till they've had some training. Don't send them out until at least 6 months has passed and you've given some training. And that enraged me, because we were in the midst of a Jesus People revival. We had concert ministry in a little building downtown we called The Door. And it was packed, I think, 35 foot wide, 40 foot long, a tiny little building, packed, but there was that many outside the front door, outside the back door, God saving young people right and left. And I'm hearing this idiot say in this book, don't send them out till they've been saved 6 months. After 6 months, they're dead. And so if you listen to that tape, it's worth your time to read to it, because I'm very upset when I'm preaching that. I upset the whole conference when I preached that because I shot at that. Idiocy. Your best witnesses are new converts. They don't need a course in theology. All they need to do is you go tell somebody what Jesus did for you, and that'll fill your building. Get them out on the streets as soon as you can. So the new converts are the ones that where the fruit is, and you need to get them out on the street as soon as you can, get them witnessing, and this is one of the secrets of that. So this is not up for debate. Our converts need a military mindset. How many of you have ever been in the military? Let me see your hands here. Thank God. A lot of places I go, there's maybe two raise their hand, and they don't have the slightest clue what I'm talking about. So a military mindset, the Bible's filled with it. I preached a whole sermon in the May rally in Phoenix, and my sermon was Militant Christianity, because the Bible's filled with it. It was written when military experience and mindset was filled Israel, because they were occupied by the Roman army, and many of the things that are in the New Testament you can't understand if you have no military understanding. But if you went to a soldier and you ask this soldier, what is your mission? Generally, they will immediately tell you what their mission is. I think I had a military number. My name is, if my memory is correct, is 4358, which meant I was a flight line electrician. That's my occupational number. And if you put it into a computer, you would get it back out. They would tell you what it was. And so one of my first experiences in the military is I went into boot camp in Wichita Falls, Texas. And as I went in, they put hundreds of us in a old hangar and read us the Articles of War. How many of you know what the Articles of War are? 1, 2, 3. The Articles of War are reading you what you are, telling you they own you, and what they're going to do to hurt you if you don't obey what they would tell you to do. That's what the article. That's my summation of it. They took me to a barber shop. I had long, wavy hair, had a duck tail. I mean, it was a beauty to behold. All of your bald today, you don't know what that is, but I had hair. The barber said, "How do you want that?" I said, "Take a little off the ears here." And he said, zzz, zzz, zzz. I came out bald as a cue ball. So if you ask a military man, what is their mission, they will tell you. But a mission of a minister of the gospel or a believer, period, is to propagate the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's your single mission from start to finish. That sums it up. It may be different methods of doing that, but that's what your mission is. And many of the parables of Jesus, he focuses in what needs to take place. He tells a parable about the woman, the lost coin, which is her dowry, of the lost sheep, of the lost son. All of these begin to document the value that is embraced by people in these various events. And the issue is the search to regain and retain that. They attempt to place to us an understanding of what ought to be natural in us, in the search for souls, and it ought to grip your heart. I have many people, where are you going next? Where have you been next? And so they kind of say that offhand, but actually they're eaten up with envy that I still have energy. Some of you guys are 40 years old, you got tired of me even talking about it now. See, where do you get all the energy? I pray for energy. God promises 2 places in the Bible to give us the energy of youth and old age. And I pray that God, I want the energy of youth and old age. They want to know what kind of vitamins I'm taking. The real vitamin is laying hold of God. I pray for two things. I pray for the energy of youth. In old age, I pray for a sound mind. Both of those are pretty necessary qualifications. And so let's bring this to the forefront here, because many people have removed themselves from the harvest. Some of them are searching for a revelation of the value of souls. I want to tell you that one thing that drives me is the desire to bring people to Jesus Christ. Many people have removed themselves from the harvest. Matthew 9:37 and 38 gives us a little bit of insight. It says, when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them because they were faint and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. So let's ponder that. Sheep having no shepherd. Now that's not a compliment on you. The reason is that sheep are stupid. Did you know the sheep, if it rolls over on its back, it can't get back up by itself? They're afraid to walk through running water. Sheep are helpless without a shepherd. A few years ago, I was hunting down the desert, and so in Arizona, a lot of people have sheep. And so in the summertime, they have them up in the mountains where it's cool, where there's grasses growing. And in the summertime, they haul them down in the desert. And so where we hunted quite frequent for jackrabbits, our mission is to kill jackrabbits. They all get the plague, and they die. So there's jackrabbits down there, and God put them on planet Earth for men to have target practice. So. I'm making a lot of people nervous now. I was preaching in Australia, and I was giving some illustration. Every year I go up one time on the Indian reservation, and David Maldonado, when I get up there, he has a hunting license for me on the Indian reservation. They have fields there that they've planted, and they're just filled with prairie dogs. This year we went up, and when we came there, we'd see 15 or 20 prairie dogs running out of those fields. And so the Indians, last I knew, they were giving a box of 22 shell for anybody that's going out there on the reservation. They'd get as a gift because it's running their fields. So they gave me years ago a 223 rifle with a loophole scope. It's can't think of the name, but it's a deadly machine. So I was preaching in Australia, and this sermon illustration, I was telling that, and I said, as long as you can put that crosshair on them, they're dead. I don't care how far they are out there. And so here's this pastor's mother, and she's there, and her eyes are getting wider and wider. And so he told me, he said, my mother got really upset at you. Australians don't like guns. So I'm telling this, and I'm upsetting the whole bunch, but I feel it's my calling, Al Gore would be proud of me. So we were telling this story. I was in a fellowship, and I'm telling this story. I said 3 men in a Jeep and a shotgun can do major damage. And so occasionally we scare up a coyote, and he's dead meat. So I'm telling her eyes are getting wider and wider. And she said, you kill them? I said, of course. What's this have to do with hunting? Well, who knows? So at any rate, we scared up a sheep because as I began to tell this story, when the heat comes in the summer, they come together, these sheep up, take them back up to the mountains again. And so here we are, and we're driving down this road, and here's this long little sheep. He's trotting along, and he stops, and he looks back at us like, won't somebody help me? And so this guy that's driving, he said, that sheep has been left today. They picked up these sheep, took them back to the mountain. He won't last the day. The coyotes will get him before the day is over. He said, actually, the rules say we could take that sheep as our own and butcher it, take it home, and it wouldn't be illegal. I said, wow. But we were busy, so we're on our way. But here's this little sheep now. That sheep is in a hostile environment. There's no shepherd around. It will not last the day because they're helpless to defend themselves, and there's lots of critters around looking for sheep lost. Bring that into the application for you and I. This is why Jesus calls human beings sheep, is because they're helpless without a shepherd. He uses many illustrations for that, and this makes our point of the value. And so this lets us understand we should be motivated to witness and motivated to reach people. Matthew 19 or 9 rather, and verse 36 says, but when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them because they were faint and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Every church ought to have a mission statement, and generally they do. Somewhere in their bylaw, somewhere in their application, they'll have a statement. We are dedicated to evangelize the lost. This inquires what they should be doing. But if you ask them, actually, what is it you're doing? Most churches aren't doing very much. They're holding meetings in buildings, talking about some speaker, and he's motivating them for money or whatever he's doing. That's largely become the occupation of much of the church. And our brother Aviles spoke very ably about the mega churches. And what they're doing is they're proselyting people from your churches, if they can, by offering single women automobile repair and furnishing a field for men to come in and look for women and so on and so forth. So that's largely what they're doing. But actually, as far as evangelizing the sheep, they're not doing very much. Our fellowship is motivated. We send our pastors out. We say, don't go try to win people out of other churches. Our mission is to win sinners. If your mission is other than that, you'll pay a price. We tell them, don't build your church out of religious people. Religious people will come in. Sometimes they've been thrown out of other churches, so they come into your church to try that for a round. Any stranger shows up from our fellowship, I say, what are you doing here? I say, why do you do that? Because sometimes they're visiting you for various reasons. I say, what are you talking about, Pastor? Well, we do judge sin. We put fornicators out of our church if they don't repent instantly. There's a church right across the road from us, and we filled it with fornicators. Where we send them. So, evangelism is a calling that the church has, which is the search for souls. Can you say amen? We have a drug rehab ministry. That's a major problem in America today. There's a superhighway from California to Florida. Every truck driver knows what doctor, where they are on the route, they can stop and get drugs at. It's a common thing. Much of our adult population, and they go to your church, are addicted to drugs. Our drug ministry, David Sanchez, this is what motivated him, is he is a trained nurse, medically trained. He worked in the local hospital. He grew tired of seeing the same people overdose in the emergency room, had a burden to start a rehab ministry. He's treating elderly people. He said, Pastor, I have to give these people drugs because they have a prescription for them, and I know they're nothing but drug addicts. They don't have to have, though, but they want them. So he started a drug rehab ministry, doing very well at it. and it's a major problem. It's a problem in your church. You may not think it is, but it is. They go get an operation. The doctor will give them an opioid, which is oxycodone or OxyContin. One hit, they're addicted. People who have an operation, immediately they have people, you have any leftover, a little pain here. Did you know that the body is able to create its own pain to call for drugs? How many of you know that? Rich Cox, ex-policeman, he told me that. I said, you're kidding me. He said, no, the body is able to, somehow the senses are able to create pain to be medicated on its own. I said, wow, I didn't know that. So here we have the search for souls. And this brings us into all hands on deck. That's a naval term. What it means is when the ship's in trouble, all hands on deck. They come to the forefront to begin to save the ship. And this is what we have today in the Christian field. On December the 7th, 1941, I was walking out of my yard. My dad stepped out on the porch and he said, Japan has bombed Pearl Harbor. I said, that's interesting. I went ahead chasing ants and doing whatever I was doing. Had no clue what that meant. Instantly, America changed. It was not like we do today with little police action. It was total war. Everything changed in America. Everything was rationed. Levi's were rationed. Food was rationed. You couldn't buy meat except it was rationed because every effort went toward the war, total mobilization. Men began to leave. My brothers all left to join the military. I was too young. And so instantly, because it's total war, and that's what all hands on deck mean. Every asset, every person, women for the first time began to go into the factories and work. So here's the picture that we have. The reason that the world has not been evangelized is because this mentality has never laid hold of most of the church, but it ought to grip us and help us. Our new converts in the early days of Prescott, if we, we had revivals 3 weeks long. Some say, what night are we going to the revival, dear? Every night. That make you upset? If we had nothing going, they'd make their own going. If we had no revival going, they'd have a prayer meeting going somewhere, or they'd do their own outreach somewhere because they were totally involved in that. They'd have a prayer meeting in somebody's house because this mentality gripped them that this is for keeps and all hands ought to be on deck. And so this is the artistry of teamwork, we could say. The one thing that we've been able to accomplish in our fellowship is that common people can do something for God. I just had a man talk to me, wants to do something. I said, the blessing of our fellowship is that just common people, we are a lay movement. We have very few men. I went to Bible school. I don't recommend it for anybody because it's a place where unbelief is programmed into. Most seminaries and Bible schools are staffed by people who have failed in the ministry, and they go into the seminary or the Bible school so they can impart that to whoever they confront. I never recommend it to anyone. I barely escaped with my soul. That doesn't mean we don't study the Bible, preach the Bible, but it's how you get it makes the difference. So the artistry of teamwork is here, and we're having deliberate imagery, as we said, in the book of John chapter 4 and verse 36. And he that reapeth receives wages and gathers fruit unto life eternal, that both he that sows and he that reaps may rejoice together. And here is that saying true. One sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that. on which you bestowed no labor. Other men labored, and you're entered into their labors. A man joined us from the mission field, Keith Sullivan, his wife Carrie, and he made an interesting statement to me. He said, I get to see now the genius of the Prescott Church. He said, you and Pastor Greg, I've seen the Potter's House, haunted house work. I've seen the Christmas plays. I've seen it. And you and Greg didn't do any of these. You have people that did that. Yes, because this is what we have tried to impart to people. Everyone can do something for God. Can you say amen? Everyone. I preached a sermon last year, I think it was, challenged the people. We had a young man and his wife come to me a couple, 3 weeks later. But my challenge was, every single person can do something. Your job is to find out something that God will enable you to be involved in. And he came to me a couple, 3 weeks later and said, Pastor, we heard that sermon. And he said, we've started a ministry. I said, what's that? He said, we visit old people, elderly people. If they need a ride anywhere, we give them that. If they need to go shopping anywhere, they need any work done around there, my wife and I have taken up the ministry of ministering to elderly people. If the elderly people, if they just had somebody sit down and had a brain and talk to them, it'd make their whole day. Can you say amen? You say, just talk? Yeah, talk. Shut off that tube and listen to a human being that's concerned about you. So I said, well, that's great. That young man is in a ministry today. He's a pastor. Because that desire to touch people begin to work out. Paul defines this issue, 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 9, for we are laborers together with God. We are God's cultivated field. You are God's cultivated field. You are God's building. Now ponder that for a moment as we work through this. Paul put this potent picture in 1 Corinthians 3, verse 5 through 8. Who then is Paul? And who's Apollos, but ministers by whom you believe? Even as the Lord gave to every man. I planted, and Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then, neither is he that plants anything, neither he that waters, but God that gives the increase. Now he that plants and he that waters are one, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labor. I just came from Australia. I went over there in 2009. The former pastor ripped off 175 people, went out 5 minutes away, had a building rented, started another church. And so I was in salvaging the Australian fellowship, and that church is potent and powerful. First night of the conference, they had 900 people in the congregation there, and they grew each week, planted a new church in Indonesia. The Indonesian planted a work out, and 3 new churches in Australia filled with the presence and the power of God, and I can tell you that it has recovered. When I went into that church in 2009, I had people come to me. The platform singers left, all the Bible study leaders left, all the drama group left. I had a man come to me and said, Pastor, can I start a Sunday school? We don't have any Sundays. I said, yep, go for it. And then I had another guy come and said, can I start a drama group? We don't have a drama. I said, go for it. I had men come to me. One man came and said, can I do a crusade in the park? I said, absolutely. He had asked to do the crusade by the former pastor. They had an outreach trailer that's elevated that you could pull it up on the curb and preach. And so I said, go for it. Tell me what you need. And so he did that. And I went to that first crusade. 75 of our people were there. I said, wow, these people do want to do something for God. The reason this was lit them up is the former pastor would not let them do anything unless he controlled it. Control is a horrible state of the ego. Turn your people loose. Every ministry we have in Prescott, I did not start. People came to me and said, what do you think about it? I said, absolutely, give it a whirl. Did it all work? No. Did I okay everyone? No, some of them are nut factors, But people have to be turned loose. Our street drum, I had a man come to me and said, what do you think about street drum? I said, what's that? He said, well, we go out on the street, we create a little drama, and a crowd gathers, and we start witnessing to them and then preach the gospel. I said, it sounds great to me. Do it. So they do. Whiskey Row is a wonderful place in Prescott. It's off the downtown park. It's called Whiskey Row because it is Whiskey Row. So there's bars, one right after the other. So a classic they did. They got a coffin. And this coffin, they're all dressed up and they're carrying this coffin on the sidewalk right down Whiskey Road. Hundreds of people. What on earth is this, a funeral? So they get halfway down and the lid opens, the guy gets out and starts to preach to them. Yes. I didn't make that. They made that. When I was in Perth in 2009, a classic event happened. There's a man went in, and he wasn't from ours, he's another fellowship, but it was genius. And he said, I'm going to do a Bible study, folks, and if you can answer these questions, I'll give you $5. So he started asking simple Bible questions, and the first one was answered. He sent him out $5, and for $30, he gathered 200 people together. When have you ever done an outreach for $30 and gathered 200 people? I said, that's genius. That genius is in people. It's in you. The creativity and the imagination that can do that is in human beings, but you have to turn them loose to do that. And I did one of the first outreaches in 2009. There's a Hay Street Mall where they go to preach with wisdom. You should never carry those over 30 minutes because if you do, you trigger bad things begin to happen. Eggs and the homos come and attack you, but you do 30 minutes. So I went down there. All 4 of our council members were in that. I said, thank God. Something's at work in this church, and it's continuing on today. Pastor Payne is. So I just say that to give you some triggering ideas. There's many people that are involved in this, and this God has helped. We have impact teams. How many have ever heard of an impact team? 4 of you? First impact team we did was probably in 1971 or 2. We went into Phoenix, Arizona, and 75 people from the Prescott Church went down, did an impact team in Canto Park and the streets there, went into the first Foursquare Church in Phoenix, and we pulled in 110 hardcore sinners. One of them was dressed in a Jesus robe. He was a sight. Long hair. I think he even thought he was Jesus. We had another one. He had a bolt-action rifle. It's a Levi jacket. It's there. Most of them were barefooted, and people got saved. A man got saved that day that became their youth leader. My niece attends that church, and when she saw these people coming in, she's looking at them. She said, women, I sure hope you know what you're doing. Well, I did know what I was doing. I was reaching sinners. Can you say amen? That was an impact team. We named it. We began to, it started being a guerrilla team. But Nervous Nellie's got a guerrilla, It sounds like military to me. So they stopped inviting us. So we named it impact teams. Just give them a little piece, So music groups, we began to cap on music group. We did what's called rock concerts. They weren't rock concerts. Most of these musicians were horrible anyway, Be truthful. Many of our music groups, they're never going to cut a record, I can tell you for sure. Sometimes I go to these conferences, they play rap music, and I have to lean over and say, what did they say? I'm sorry, I can't understand the words, Set up workers, Think about that now. The people that have to set up a concert outreach or a music group outreach. I tell one classic story. We have a little city close to Preston. It's a mining town, Baghdad, Arizona. I don't know how many people live there. I don't think it's over 1,000. But it's a mining town, copper mining town, open pit copper mine. And we did a music outreach in the high school auditorium. We had 250 people. I said, my word, these people don't have much to do here. I said, we need to start a church down there. So we got the use of the dining room of a little restaurant out there, and we started doing a Sunday afternoon service down there, sent a group down, and so they all gathered up together, everybody worked together, load up the equipment, go down, set up the chairs, clean it when they're finished, and all of that. And so it looked really good. So we had this one disciple said, well, he seems to be doing well. Let's make him the pastor. So before he'd gotten involved, he's loading equipment. The minute he's made the pastor, hey, you do this. He never put his hand to another thing for that. That, of course, killed that church very quickly because he preached a sermon soon, 18 points on prayer, They're asleep by the time he got through. 2.5 hours, 18 points on prayer. So the rule of preaching is stand up, speak up, and shut up. This is a shotgun sermon. You can tell that already. So Matthew chapter 9:38 and 39. 9:30. Then saith he unto his disciple, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the labors are few. Pray you therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. So I started out talking about Billy Graham. Think about this, because of all the people that contributed, some of these are prominent names that we know now, but the effort that was made to bring Billy Graham to Christ. And so in these articles on Billy Graham, the question is posed, who will replace Billy Graham? That's a question that's asked. But that's not the important question, really. Who will replace Edward Kimball? One individual that witnessed, won a soul to Christ, and the chain went down until Billy Graham was saved. That's the question this morning, and this is what our conferences are all about. Who will replace Edward Kimball? The answer is someone that will witness for Jesus Christ. I want every head bowed. I want every eye closed. Because this is the major question of the hour. Not just to have religious meetings, not just to have religious sermons, but have people who will commit themselves to winning souls. I wonder this morning as we're sitting here, perhaps God's dealing with you, you're a young pastor. You know, young pastors, the issue in Christianity is not so much what we are, it's what we can become. Your responsibility as a pastor, your message is to get these people motivated to witness for Jesus Christ. This book that was written by the supervisor, he thought he was really writing a profound book, but he was actually putting forth an idea that kills the thrust of evangelism. The genius of our fellowship is that we are evangelistically oriented. Not just a creed, not just a statement, but God deliver us from ever veering from that message that we're witnesses of Jesus Christ. I wonder this morning if God would tug at your heart, begin to speak to you, Pastor. Everyone can do something, but the pastor's job is to motivate these people and to create venues and opportunities for them to confront people with the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's your job to create a culture of discipleship. It's your job to create this imagery that everyone can do something for God. And it's your job to find the opportunities where these people can be motivated to witness for Jesus Christ. That may be a crusade, that may be a concert, that may be an evangelistic outreach, it may be an impact team, but it's your responsibility to create an opportunity for discipleship to actually be played out. And disciples are made in the going. Let's stand together. These altars are open. Perhaps God's dealing with you this morning about your attitude, about your commitment, about your actually being involved. Come and find a place to pray this morning. Thank you, Father God, for abundance of blessing. We glorify your name and exalt and praise and bless you, Lord. Help us, Lord. Touch our hearts this morning, O God. Minister, Lord, to every heart, to every soul. We're looking to you, Lord. Raise up laborers into the harvest. Compass these with the love of God, we pray. Give us pastors, Lord, that'll have the heart of God. Bow down the heavens, O God, on every heart and every soul. Give us the thrust of evangelism, O God. Minister and multiply your people. Lebianda barrosaka bahaya mando kovis. We do love your name and we do bless and praise and thank you. Almighty God, fill these buildings with soul. Pour out your spirit, deliverance and enlargement, Lord, in all these representatives. Help us a spirit of unity, oneness of mind and oneness of heart, O God. Itararamanda barrosaka bahai. How wonderful is your name, Lord. How gracious is your name. Labors under the harvest fields, God. Let churches be planted out of this conference, I pray. Holy Ghost dominion, Lord, shall flow in these places. We do love your name, we do praise, and we do thank you, Father. Ileanda barrosaka bahaya. Thank you, Father God, for your dominion. Amen. Let's begin to give God praise this morning. Thank you, Lord. Help us today. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Father God. We do love your name and we do praise you, Lord. Praise God. Tonight I'm going to preach a sermon on prophecy, Jerusalem, a cup of drunkenness. Don't miss that. It's a very unique but fitting sermon on prophecy tonight. Jerusalem, cup of drunkenness. Monitor, where are you? There he is.
Amen. Wonderful preaching. 7 p.m. is our service, but 6 we open for prayer. We want to encourage you to make it here on time. Again, as you exit the building, a right turn only to make a flow of the parking lot. When you come back, always remember of our bowling alley that you will use the parking. There is allotted to us. 6 p.m. prayer, 7 is our service. Let's bow our heads, church, as we dismiss. If Pastor Duckett can close us out in prayer.